My name is Dirk Hohndel. I'm the Chief Linux and Open Source Technologist at Intel. My role is kind of fun. On the one hand, I get to help Intel internally understand how open source works and how to engage and how to be successful, which I think we are. And on the other hand, I get to talk to the community, to the outside, about the good thing that Intel does. And that translates into a lot of entertaining conversations on both sides, which has made this maybe my most interesting job yet. Today I want to talk a little bit about MeeGo and why I think MeeGo is a very interesting mobile ecosystem for Qt deployments. A lot of people ask, why MeeGo? Why another operating system? Why another flavor of Linux? And the reason why we started MeeGo, well, we started Moblin and then joined forces with Nokia to merge Moblin and MIMO into MeeGo, is that we were looking for something that was focused on a more mobile environment that understands the convergence between communication and computing, that is truly open and neutral. And I want to pause at this one because there are a lot of Linux-based operating systems out there that absolutely are not open, that are not developed in the open, where the community has no influence, no role, where, yes, people comply with open source licenses, but have no interest or intent to create an open source OS. And for us, it's very important that MeeGo is an open source OS. It brings in the community, it gets people involved, gives people the ability to contribute. And for us, it was very important to create an environment that has a very strong application framework that allows ISVs to create applications and services for these devices in a very consistent and easy manner. The MeeGo ecosystem is free of license fees. It's of course not license free. It's free of license fees, so there are no royalties involved. There are no patent grants involved that you need. Anybody can use this and build products and applications for it. But at the same time, it needs to be very business friendly. So you can't be at the extreme end of the free software community that says, oh, any proprietary extension, any proprietary application is evil. So we want to find this balance between being open and open source and community driven ourselves, but at the same time create an environment in which companies can succeed and can make money and can be successful. So MeeGo is designed for a set of segments that often are described as being mobile. I always laugh about this, and the reason I laugh about this is that one of the first MeeGo products in the market actually is a set of TVs. And when I think of MeeGo 52-inch TV, of mobile 52-inch TVs usually don't enter that picture. But if you look at the kind of application, the kind of use cases on the TV, it's actually very similar to the things you would want to do on a tablet or on a phone, or interestingly enough, on your in-vehicle infotainment system, so in your car. And so when I looked at MeeGo, one of the things I always said, Intel has a long tradition of creating the so-called software development vehicles. So this is when we bring out new hardware, we give software developers access to this new hardware by basically giving them prototype boxes so they can develop the software on this. And I figured to myself, IVI, we're doing this together with BMW, software development vehicles, I gotta get myself one of those. Unfortunately, it turns out it's not a BMW with a nice little screen inside. The software development vehicle for IVI is an ugly little attaché case that has a screen built in and the computer sitting in the lower half. It's really boring, actually. Very disappointing. But I hear from my friends at BMW that once it's inside the 7 Series Beamer, it's really nice. Anyway, so what we're doing is we're covering a somewhat broad set of devices, but that all have a few things in common. So they have a rich visual user interface. They have the desire to be able to present the user with high definition video, with entertainment, with applications, with things that are connected, things that allow you to connect, and with an environment that hopefully is consistent across these different device classes, as some of these device classes are beginning to merge. So the borders between a handheld, a tablet, and sometimes even the netbook, because there are touch-enabled netbooks, are becoming less and less pronounced. And so this is a very interesting segment that we want to address here. We have one single unified operating system that covers all of these. And I have to say this with, of course, a little caveat. We do support different hardware platforms. So this runs on Atom and on ARM. And of course, you have to have binaries specific for your underlying architecture. But the goal is that a simple recompile will give you applications that run on any MeeGo-compliant device. I mentioned earlier that the ecosystem to us is important. Being able to create an ecosystem that is rich, that is interesting, and most importantly, that allows people to make money. So we have built the design of the ecosystem in a way that the basis, the foundation is open, but above this, you are able to create services, you're able to create devices, you're able to create software that allow you to make money, not just as a service provider, but actually as an ISV. So the application stores are a very interesting topic here. The ability to have either a branded store by a service provider, think of a telco company, or by one of the component providers, think Intel's App Store, is very important to us. Another thing that is very important in this space is that you have to have a user experience that you can differentiate on. You cannot have a world where every device based on MeeGo looks the same to the customer, because in the consumer electronics world, or even in cars, there is a lot of brand identity behind your user experience. So while we have reference user experiences, you see the, I think by now pretty well-known netbook user experience, and some first looks at the phone and the tablet UI. These are reference implementations, and the way this is designed, it is very easy to create a branded look and feel on top of that, so that different phone manufacturers can have very distinct look and feel to their devices, so that you don't have a TV that necessarily looks exactly the same way as your car looks. I mean, one of the big differences, of course, how do you interact with this? Is it touch? Is it a keyboard? Is it a remote control? Are you interacting with it while driving 250 kilometers an hour on the Autobahn, or while sitting on the sofa? Very different expectations, very different restrictions of what you can do. But it should all have the ability to have apps integrated and third-party, have internet, have a rich media environment, 3D animated user interface, and of course, an application store. I keep coming back to this one because that's pretty important, especially to this audience, since I think most of you are ISVs. This is our roadmap of what we're working on. So we are very close to the second box from the right. So this month we are going to have the MeeGo 1.1 OS release. So this includes the touch framework. This includes the handset UX. A lot of this has already been shown in the day one code release earlier this year. But this is basically where, from our point of view, the whole commercial activity around MeeGo really starts. Today, as I guess most of you are aware, there aren't a lot of MeeGo devices out that you can actually buy. There are a couple. But we expect that based on MeeGo 1.1, we will see a lot more activity in the industry, and there will be a lot more that people actually can put their hands on, work with, and create more excitement. Today, it's still very much us telling the world, oh, this is going to be great. But I think starting this month, this will change. We have roughly a 6-month release cadence, so next spring, I expect the next version, MeeGo 1.2. The content and the exact new features are still under planning in the working groups. Again, this is an open source project, so a lot of people are involved, and everyone is invited to participate. But we certainly see this as an innovative process where each new release brings new features, brings new capabilities, and hopefully brings in new device classes. I will not walk you through this eye chart. This is an overview of the MeeGo architecture. I mean, the obvious things that will be interesting to this audience, the APIs are around the Qt toolkit and the web runtime. There is a plethora of APIs below that focused on the typical use cases for a mobile device. So location-aware APIs, data management APIs, media APIs. But this whole thing is packaged in a way that regardless which device you're on, you have access to all of the core APIs, so you can write consistent applications independent of the device class that you're working on. When we released the first version of the MeeGo netbook user experience, we experienced something very interesting. A lot of hardcore Linux hackers at first said, ooh, that doesn't look like what I'm used to, this is weird. Because this was maybe the first time that someone tried to create a user experience for a device that kind of looks like a computer that does not follow the desktop metaphor. And research has shown for 20 years that the desktop is actually a very stupid way to organize your computer. This is not intuitive at all. Just because we all have done it since we went to grade school does not mean it's intuitive. And this is actually trying to create a new way to interact with what you do with a relatively simple mobile computer. So you engage with your social network, you may do email, you definitely listen to music or watch movies, you want to be able to take care of your calendar. And this is all presented in a much more intuitive way, in a way where you can give this to your mother or grandmother, some of you are much younger than me, and have them play around with it, and they get it within minutes. And to me, this is the biggest confirmation that we were going in the right direction with this, is how many times we've tried to get people who have no computer experience, give them a MeeGo netbook, and have them do things on the internet within minutes. And I love my Mac, and I respect Windows 7, but I don't think you have the same experience with those operating systems, unless, of course, you've been in the computer industry for any of the last 20 years and have been schooled to think that you click on the start button to shut down your computer. Yeah, sure. And of course, now I had a rental car the other day, which was a BMW, which now has the same metaphor. It has a start-stop button. Okay. Yeah. So the handset UI it says here under construction. I love that. So this is mostly a mock-up, what you see here. And apparently we're talking to Dave Jones, who is the kernel maintainer at Fedora. Interesting. It wasn't my screenshot. But so the handset UI, please understand this is a reference UI. So people looking at this say, oh, this looks kind of clunky. But no, this is a reference UI. This is designed to show capabilities, and it's actually much more fun if you see it in motion. We expect the carriers and the device vendors to do a lot more than you see with these simple figures. But it gives you an idea where we are trying to go with this. Now, MeeGo in devices that you can actually buy is still in its infancy. But interestingly enough, the industry momentum around it is quite spectacular. And every time I give a presentation on MeeGo, I look at the ISV part of this slide, and it gets more and more crowded. So the number of companies who are trying to create solutions for MeeGo is growing at amazing speed. MeeGo is not an Intel product or a Nokia product for that. MeeGo is a project of the Linux Foundation. And that has been one of the core reasons for its success, because MeeGo truly is independent of vendors. So while Intel is one of the companies who founded this, MeeGo, of course, runs on ARM. And while Nokia is one of the core contributors, we have several different phone vendors looking at building MeeGo-based phones. And so the Linux Foundation is the independent, neutral organization that hosts MeeGo, that runs the technical steering group, runs the events around MeeGo. We have the big MeeGo conference in Dublin next month, and I hope to see many of you there. And the Linux Foundation has the credibility to be independent from the vendors, which a lot of the carriers especially were very concerned about, but also a lot of the ISVs have told us is very important to them. So the ecosystem is growing very fast. I'm pretty sure that a couple of months from now, we will need to provide eyeglasses to actually be able to read the ISV and especially the service provider side. Right now, this is pretty quiet down there, but there's a lot going on. A couple of examples of MeeGo devices that you may have seen. First, the WeTab, which we had in the Intel booth, or actually have in the Intel booth downstairs. A small caveat about the WeTab. The team is very proud that their user experience is not the MeeGo user experience. You can take this to mean whatever you want, but whatever user experience you see on the tablet is not what we on the MeeGo side think of a tablet user experience. But it shows a lot of the infrastructure that is interesting. It's based on more or less an Intel netbook platform. Shows very nice graphics performance, compute performance, has a responsive touch screen, and all of this at a decent price. So I think it's a very interesting device to show the potential of this category. The underlying infrastructure used on the WeTab is indeed MeeGo. So Qt applications will run. The OS optimizations that we have done for MeeGo are there. It's just the user experience that is different. Another device is the Amino Connected TV, which is a very interesting case of the strength of open source in this environment. And a lot of people say, you know, I don't care if I use an iPhone or an Android phone, whether it's open source or closed, doesn't matter to me. It's interesting that here's a vendor who says to them it makes a huge difference that this is open source, because the ability to engage, the ability to port, the ability to influence what's going on is so much bigger in an open source project. And as an open source person inside Intel, this is what I've been preaching to the hardware side of the company for many, many years. And it's really exciting to now have the hardware guys come to me and tell me how exciting this open source stuff is. Because it's like, yeah, should have listened 5 years ago. So the Amino TV is one of the first products that we're going to see MeeGo-based out there in the market. I obviously can't talk about other companies' launch plans, but it's certainly one of the leaders in the pack, definitely the leader on the MeeGo TV side. And the last one is IVI, and I don't have BMW as an example here because somebody else actually has a shipping car with MeeGo IVI in it. It's kind of hard to buy because I haven't seen I don't even know how to pronounce this, a Haftai B11 in the US or in Germany. Actually, I was in China a couple of months ago, and I tried to find out from my Chinese coworkers if they had seen a half-tie, but apparently this is kind of a startup car manufacturer as well. So they aren't as ubiquitous as the Golf Plus that I'm driving as a rental this time. But it's a very cool environment. I have seen the mock-up of their in-vehicle infotainment system, and it's really cool. And to have this in a truly ultra-low-end car was quite a surprise to me, because, I mean, these are cars that have prices that would make VW shiver in fear. Seriously. And of course, as a driver who likes to survive the next crash, you might shiver in fear. Oh, I forgot I'm on video. I'm sorry. Let's go back from hardware, real hardware, to the application ecosystem. So one of the things that I find interesting in the way MeeGo is being presented is on this slide. And if you look at the red box, it talks of hundreds of native Linux apps. And it contrasts that to the blue box of thousands of Qt applications. And a lot of people ask me, aren't Qt applications native Linux apps as well? What we're trying to tell you here is actually a little different. There are a large number of native Linux applications that run. Many of them are Qt-based, some of them aren't. But we have an ecosystem of thousands of Qt apps that have been developed for other platforms in Qt and that are very, very easy to port to MeeGo simply by using the Qt infrastructure. So in Qt Creator, you can create MeeGo apps out of your existing apps with very, very little porting effort. So we expect that our focus on Qt as the framework for application development will give us access to a much wider range of ISVs and a much wider range of applications for MeeGo. And if you look at the attempts of creating desktop computers, whatever that means, client computers with Linux over the past, I guess, 15 years. I started talking about this as SUSE CTO in 97, I think. Where it always fell apart was applications. Because whenever it's a client device and a device with a user experience that goes beyond the text terminal, in the past, Linux has had its issues. And we believe, some people in the front are laughing. Yeah, we've had our issues. Anybody who has seen the first version of ABI Word for Linux in 96, 7 knows what I mean with issues. But we believe that Qt as a framework and the infrastructure that is available will actually make it very easy for people to develop very interesting and very sleek applications for MeeGo. And we see so much interest in the ecosystem, and I guess the full room shows that there's more interest here, that I think this is going to make a major difference in our ability to attract interesting but native apps for our platform. Newly native apps, I guess I should say. So the promise that we are giving to people is there is one API across multiple categories. There is one MeeGo API. It's obviously Qt. It's a bunch of other APIs. They were in the architecture chart earlier. But it's a defined set. There's a compliance spec around that. So basically, if you have a MeeGo device, you're guaranteed that these APIs are present. So you have an easy target to develop for across different device classes. You have great IDE tools around this. There are good distribution channels available, obviously, the branded stores, our own store, or a store that any service provider could offer. And there are go-to-market programs available. So up until today, the companies involved in MeeGo have had a very low profile in actively trying to create market momentum, simply because there weren't devices ready, the software was still under a lot of development, we felt we weren't quite there yet. But starting with MeeGo 1.1, we are going to see a significant change in that, which means we're going to see a lot more momentum for MeeGo-based infrastructure out there. This is a bit about the recruitment strategy. And one of the things that a lot of people who come from the desktop ISV world ignore is that in the mobile space, especially in the mobile device space, there is this two-part application strategy. On the one hand, you have the pre-launch software applications, so the applications that come with the device, which in the desktop model, usually third-party developers had no chance to be part of. It was, the pre-bundled Microsoft applications or the pre-bundled Apple applications. Here in this world, where every phone vendor, every tablet vendor, every service provider, every carrier tries to differentiate and often tries to differentiate through applications, there is a lot more opportunities for software vendors to become part of this pre-launch set of applications that come with the device. But of course, you have all the applications that come as third-party applications and can be sold separately afterwards. So there are literally two distinct software markets that have some overlap but are different in character and are different in business models. And I think there are a lot of new opportunities for people and for ISVs to engage in this space. Since I think I'm running short of time, I'll be brief on this one. This is basically the open source process that we use to create MeeGo and a bit of how the ecosystem interacts with us. And I have another slide on the governance, again, driven out of the Linux Foundation, run by a technical steering group, defined through a bunch of working groups focused on specific verticals. What I think are the key success factors are a great user experience. These are consumer devices. These are not being bought by technical geeks. These are being bought by people who want something that is fun to work with, that is easy to work with. But still a great OS under it that makes best possible use of your hardware capabilities, that is fast, that is sleek, that boots quickly, that shuts down quickly, that basically gets out of the way and disappears from your concern. It crosses multiple categories, which creates a much bigger market. It runs on multiple hardware, and I say this as an Intel person, and it gives a number of business opportunities that can be tailored for whatever company wants to get involved, whether it's a services-based business model, an applications-based business model, or a hardware-based business model. There are a number of ways to monetize this platform. So it's a fully open source platform, optimized for the hardware it runs on, has a rich set of tools to create applications for it, and a growing ecosystem that hopefully allows a lot of people to monetize it. And with that, I made it in 30 minutes, which I didn't thought I would. Thank you very much.
I have two questions. The first is regarding the set-top boxes. As you should know, the majority of chipset for set-top boxes are based on MIPS. So what's your position toward this kind of devices? And my second question is regarding Qt as an application framework. I had a look at your ABAP site a few days ago. And there is a section regarding how to develop applications for ABAP. There is no single mention about Qt.
Mm-hmm. So these are two great questions. The first one on set-top boxes. Yes, in the past, most set-top boxes were MIPS-based. There are even PowerPC-based ones. If you look at current designs, that has changed quite dramatically. If companies are interested in creating a MeeGo port to MIPS, we are, of course, very open to that. We have not had requests from customers to do that, but we are absolutely open to engage with anybody who wants to port this. On the ABAP side, ABAP for Linux-based targets like MeeGo is not live, So AppUp today is a Windows-only environment. AppUp will launch for MeeGo soonish, at which point, of course, the SDK and all this will include the Qt side of all this. But today, what you're seeing at the AppUp side is truly Windows only.
Hi, one question regarding the open aspect. I totally see the point of the app stores or something like that. What about hardware drivers? Because for me as a user who wants to use bleeding edge MeeGo, I do not want to have to wait until my service provider adapts the closed source hardware. Is there some enforcement or some possibility to enforce manufacturers?
So this is incredibly hard. And working for a hardware vendor who I think has the best track record of everyone out there on open source drivers, I can still tell you it's incredibly hard. The understanding of hardware vendors for why people want open source drivers, why they're important, why they help with innovation is still very limited. And the more you go into the CE area, the less understanding you will find. So we spend tremendous amounts of time talking to our suppliers, talking to other companies in the ecosystem, trying to educate them on why open source drivers are important. And it's hit and miss. We have a lot of companies who are listening and who are changing their ways. And we have others who just simply refuse to see why this would make a difference. And at the end of the day, my answer is you have the choice. You can vote with your dollars. And certainly we are working very hard to make sure that the one missing piece of open source drivers in our hardware stack is disappearing, the one piece of IP that we don't control. And this is under development right now. Other vendors have a much harder time with that. I want to be mindful of the next speaker. Yeah. Thank you.